Good morning, everyone. My name is Eugene Nicandri. I'm acting chairman of the board meeting of both the Power Authority and Canal Board. The chairman's been excused for today's meeting. I'd like to welcome trustees Kress and McKibben and trustee Pacenti by video. I'd also like to welcome CEO Gil Quiones and the staff of Canal and NYPA. This meeting has been scheduled pursuant to the required open meetings law, and I'd like to call the joint NYPA Canal Board meeting to order. The first item is the adoption of the proposed meeting agenda. That's been circulated, and I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carried. Next, the chair would entertain a motion to go into executive session under the appropriate section of the Public Officers, thank you, Public Officers Law 105C.
Should be burned in your memory.
F, actually, not C. It's F.
Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion's carried. We are in executive session. Okay. The joint board would like to resume in a meeting in open session. So ask for a motion to do that.
So moved. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion's carried. We're back in open session. The members of the board have been polled prior to the meeting regarding conflicts and have submitted all potential conflicts to the corporate secretary for inclusion in the minutes. And on that subject, trustee Kress is not going to vote on item 4C1, and I'm not going to vote on 4A1. So the consent agenda lacks quorum for those two items, so they will not be voted on. But the rest of the consent agenda is up for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 With those two exceptions. Aye. It's carried.
Yes, thank you.
You hand that back to Karen, please. The discussion agenda. Gil?
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, trustees and staff and the people who are watching this joint board meeting of NYPA and Canal Corporation. As customary, let me show you the progress that we are making with our strategic plan. We're calling it NYPA 2020, and you'll see this in every board meeting. These are the deliverables under each category of our strategic initiative. So we have 6 strategic initiatives in blue. You read them on a column there, from customer solutions, smart G&T, asset management, process excellence, knowledge management, and workforce planning. And then within them are very specific deliverables that we agreed to complete this year. And you'll see a notion on how far along we are by indicating our percent complete. I'm happy to report that we are tracking well at this point in time, early in the year. So with our strategic asset milestone, let me highlight some initiatives that we are pursuing. We have accelerated the implementation of our integrated smart operations center. This is a facility that we will build on the 8th floor of this building, where we will monitor our strategic software and communication infrastructure, the health of our assets, power plants, substations, transmission system, cybersecurity, physical security, and also this space will, or operation center will also be our emergency management and response center. So that is scheduled to be completed by the end of this year. We are continuing to optimize processes and streamline processes. This year, our big project is our meter to cash, meaning, our meter to our customer all the way to remittance of cash and all the functions that are involved in that entire process. Customer Energy Solutions, we have briefed you in the past about New York Energy Manager. This is our customer operations center located in Albany. This is where we monitor the energy use in a very granular way of our customers. We're now up to 1,800 mostly state buildings, public buildings across New York. Workforce planning, we have not only professionalized but also digitize our talent management and our human capital processes, and we're very proud that that is a significant form of investment that we're making to staff at the Power Authority. So you will hear from us more and more this year this concept of a digital utility. When we talk about NYPA strategic plan and the 6 strategic initiatives, digitization or digital strategy cuts across all of those 6 strategic initiatives. And when we say digitization, I just want to introduce 3 concepts that we will talk with you. We've been talking about it to our staff all the time when we say digital utility. First, digital twins of our assets and customers. What we are going to be doing is to, as we put a lot more sensors and meters and other data acquisition devices on our power plants, substations, and transmission system, what we're really doing is creating digital replicas of our assets. And with New York Energy Manager, digital replicas of our customer buildings, how they use energy, etc. So it's going to be a combination of that information that we'll be streaming in and also building computer models of those assets and of those customers. And why are we doing that? Because in the advent of today's advanced computing power and advanced software and data analytics, we now have the ability to slice and dice that data to really obtain a lot more actionable information and important insights in so many aspects of our business. And so you will probably see over time that aside from the typical engineers and scientists and utility professionals that we have here at NYPA, that we will start adding statisticians and mathematicians and people who are good with graphics, working in combination with typical NYPA employees who are engineers and scientists and utility professionals, because that's what's needed to really advance the Power Authority and transform the Power Authority in this area of digital utility. In fact, the information that we are getting today from existing systems, we probably only use 3% of the information that we're getting today. And over time, that's going to change very quickly. That, again, because of computing power and advanced software, we can really do a lot more. And cheaper sensors and meters, we can do a lot more with digital information. And the information that we create, once we have digital twins or replicas of our assets and buildings and how they operate on a dynamic basis, that data set, that information set is not only valuable to NYPA, but valuable to the industry and to third-party technology providers to universities, et cetera. And so we're also trying to figure out as a public benefit utility. We're not an investor-owned utility, we're a public benefit utility. Part of our mission is economic development. Part of our mission is to spur technology, innovation, and development in New York State. So we're also going to figure out how do we offer up and open up our data sets and information set so that we can open up to third parties so that we can spur innovation in our space here, both with our assets and with our customers in New York State. And hopefully those kind of companies will come and work with us and set up shop here in New York and create jobs and invest in New York.
Sorry, Gil, just one question before you go on, because it strikes me as, sort of the next sort of phase after data analytics is the application of predictive analytics.
Yes.
We talk about, which I would think would tie in very nicely with the stuff that we're doing around energy services that Jill's very engaged with, and how we use the information that we're collecting to best service our existing customers, but also find out what they need and how, what kinds of programs
Absolutely.
we're going to offer to them. So that layer, that application of predicting what our customers may need going forward would also be important as we develop this part of our
Absolutely.
digital growth.
Yeah, and that's precisely, you've captured precisely where we're headed. Once we have this information, think of it as your iPhone, right? We have an iPhone, and we will develop our own apps to help our customers, predictive apps and other type of apps and solutions that will help our customers. So we will do that. The other thing we will do is we will open up our platform so that other people, just like in the iPhone, other companies can develop apps for customers in general, not just NYPA customers. So that precisely is what we're going to be doing with our customers and also with our assets, with our power plants, substation, and generation assets. So it's a pretty exciting field that we're in. We're the first utility that I know that's really embarking on end-to-end digitization and converting utility into a digital utility. So NYPA, we're leading in this effort.
Just to that point around the robust data set that you'll be developing and the depth and the expanse of it, has NYPA, are there any discussions about partnering with SUNY or CUNY in standing up sort of a data research center that could look at this and really develop solutions going forward?
That will, on the customer side, SUNY is already a customer, right? But on the research side, yes, that will be the goal is not just universities and PhD students or graduate students who can work on our data, but we will partner with utilities, the grid operator, private software and hardware companies, national labs. We want them to come and make use of the data that we have to develop new products and services, not only to our customers, but also to the industry in general. And that's going to be, so we're calling that as a digital foundry. So that's the term, and creating that ecosystem around the platform and around the data set that we have.
Gil, can you enlighten me? With the switching to a digital utility, there's integration of controls into one tower here. Is there an ongoing effort to replicate that in other locations where if something happens to that integrated tower, either this pod and this pod together or in combination can do what this one?
Yes. So, Judge, think of it as we have about 16 power plants, and we lease. We have a long-term lease with another power plant and HTP. That pretty much is I would call our supply asset. We own about 22, 24 substations and 1,400 circuit mile of transmission. We're going to be building a dedicated communication system that will link all of those assets. And we will put a lot of sensors and data acquisition devices in those assets. We will do computer modeling of those assets, bring that information into a what's called a relational database, basically. And so it's really not location dependent, because this thing is going to be a digital information. So it's accessible to from multiple sites. What will happen is we can then create applications and solutions and get insights. For example, on how do we this one application, the item that the governor announced when he traveled in Israel, created by Empress. I gave you an infographic in front of you. Basically, it's a system that monitors our transformers right now just in Niagara constantly. And if there's something wrong with that transformer or the transformer bushing, whether it's temperatures too high or the dissolved gases in the transformer, the chemical composition has changed, it will shut it down before it suffers catastrophic failure. Or we may measure the vibration on a bearing of a turbine, for example, and if it's outside the norm, certain parameters are outside the norm, instead of waiting for it to break, we can fix it ahead of time, as Trustee McKibben said, predictive analytics. So those are the kind of things. So it's really a smart decision support system for the Power Authority, and also from a business perspective, creating new value-added products and services for our customers and for the industry in general. Okay. So as we've been working on a lot of this, these are just examples and highlights. We built we added a smart grid technology to our Marcy South transmission line that emanates from Utica, where Trustee Picenti is, all the way down to the lower Hudson Valley. And using existing lines, we increased the power delivery by 440 megawatts from upstate to downstate. I mentioned about the creation of the communication backbone. New York Energy Manager, that's kind of like how it looks. If you go to our office, maybe our future meeting we will hold at the New York Energy Manager in Albany, so that you can see exactly like that big cockpit on how we monitor all 1,800 buildings across New York State, and they're monitoring their digital twins, basically. And within NYPA, so it's not just our customers and assets, but all the corporate functions and support within NYPA we're also digitizing. Ariba with our procurement, now we're calling strategic supply management. At some point, we're going to look at SAP, which is our big enterprise finance and other software here. Maximo, that's a product by IBM. We instituted that 2 years ago in Joe Kessler's group in operations, and Primavera, our project manager. So this digital, when we say end-to-end digitization or end-to-end digital strategy of NYPA, we are doing it across the organization, sideways and top-down. And it's really the first utility embarking. We are the first utility embarking in this strategy, and we're making a big bet. This is a big bet for us in digital investment. We are saying that this is what a utility of the future is like, and by, I would say, 2020, we will be close to that destination. So I'm not going to go through this, but one partnership that I want to highlight is with GE. We, after a competitive solicitation of providers, we selected GE to help us digitize our generation, transmission, and substation. So they have a platform called Predix, and we have implemented that. We are now creating digital replicas or twins of our gas power plants in New York City, because they're all GE plants. That's the easiest and the quickest way for us to start. But very quickly, we're going to spread this around our hydro assets and our transmission and substation. We are what GE calls their lighthouse customer. It's really a strategic partner, so they've been highlighting us in all of their public presentations because we're the first utility really doing this on an end-to-end basis. We're learning a lot from them, but I bet you they're learning a lot from us too in this partnership, and we are excited in really growing this. They were supposed to be here last week, but then it snowed, so we had to reschedule. But we are scheduled to have a 3-day workshop with GE to really propel this initiative. So, yes.
Follow on to that, when you mentioned the public benefit corporation, is there an opportunity for NYPA, since it sounds like you're their first utility customer, to build with GE some product, some IP that could be sold to
Yes.
other utilities?
So when I described earlier that we will make our platform and our data set information set available to third parties, it will be at a price. While we're a public benefit corporation, we need to recover our costs and at least our cost of capital. So we believe the information is valuable. We're getting a lot of indication that information set is going to be very valuable. So Justin and Bob Lurie are already exploring with other similar software type companies what are the right business model. Is it an intellectual property royalty, or is it a sharing of revenue of future products and services? So we need to look at various business models that are appropriate for our application. With that said, we're not opening this up just for free for everybody. It will be at a price that is we think is appropriate relative to the value of the information. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gil. Next item is strategic initiatives. Doug McMahon.
I'll take this one.
Bob Lurie.
No, I'll just use this. Thanks. So Gil is, as always, given a great introduction to some of our future strategic themes. The area of digitization being first and foremost. So all I want to do is really give you an update on the process we're going to go through this year in our strategic planning, which we do every year. But since our strategic plan was issued, our NYPA Vision 2020 was issued in 2013, 2014, we believe that it's now time to refresh that plan and reissue it to the public, reflecting a lot of the major changes that have occurred since that time. And that includes some of the things you see here, technology changes such as the rise of data analytics and the Internet of Things, digital technologies that really have the potential to transform our business as it has many other businesses already and is in the process of doing so. Changes in regulatory and policy environment, the rise of the clean energy mandates in New York and other places certainly present opportunities for us that were reflected in our original plan to some degree, but what we want to do now is look at ways to really potentially accelerate and take a leadership role beyond what was even in our original plan. But there are also some threats to our strategic position as well, with sustained low energy prices we've talked a lot about at past trustee meetings. That means that we are now in a very competitively pressured situation in our generation business that we've never been in before, and we don't believe that's likely to change soon. So we need to be able to respond to that and talk about how do we perhaps become more efficient so that we continue to be the low-cost provider in the market, but also how do we provide new services to customers to make sure that we can generate new revenue in response to that threat. So we'll be getting our management team together this year to discuss that, come up with an action plan, and reissue our revised or refreshed strategic plan. Our original plan will not change. We still have our 6 strategic initiatives that Gil talks to you about at every meeting, but we may want to re-emphasize or reallocate resources to accelerate certain things and make sure we're incorporating all the trends. So leading up to that, we've gone through a scenario planning exercise. We've looked at all the trends and uncertainties in the marketplace with respect to technology, policy, regulation, talked about what's driving all of those changes. And then from that, we're developing a set of future scenarios, really pictures of what the future could look like in the energy industry. And what the reason we do that is to then evaluate our potential strategies against those scenarios and say, how might these strategies perform if these different scenarios take place? So what we ideally want to have is robust scenarios that work across a multitude of scenarios. There are such things as no regret scenarios, which are designed really to at least have a positive impact or a neutral impact across all scenarios. That's not necessarily the best thing to do in all cases because you could not get out of bed and have a no regret strategy. But we want to take action, take a leadership role, but evaluate our strategies against those scenarios and make sure that we understand the risks inherent in all of those strategies, depending on what might occur in the future. So we're going to start by having our strategy offsite with our management team. We're going to have about 30, 35 people across the organization helping us put this together. We're going to look at our competitive position today and how that might change over time in these different scenarios. We're going to, from that, look at what are the strategic threats and, most importantly, the opportunities we have to expand our leadership role in the marketplace. We're going to look at ways to strengthen some of these strategic themes that we talked about. Gil talked about one of the most important ones of digitization. How can we weave that through our plan and use these new technologies to accelerate the benefits of the plan? And then look at places where there might be gaps, either in some of our offensive or defensive strategies to manage risks and take advantage of these opportunities. So later in the year, we're going to be looking at refreshing and reissuing this plan. In the meantime, we want to make sure that we bring the trustees into that conversation. So we're going to have our first offsite meeting on March 30th. The second one is on April 17th. And after that, we want to come back and talk with you. We'd like to try to schedule a more extended conversation about these topics, as we've done with you in the past. And we're trying to work the calendar right now and whether to do that within an existing meeting or have a separate meeting. We'll be back to you on that, but we're targeting around the June timeframe to set that up. Then later in the year, we would incorporate all of that input from our management team, from you, from outside sources, and refresh and reissue the strategic plan. Would still be targeted at 2020, but would have the benefit of all of this updated information. So I'll stop there and ask if you have any questions.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enterprise risk management, Subigya.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, trustees, staff, CEO Gil, and other senior staff of NYPA and Canals. I'm here to give you a quick update on the risk management activities. So this is the familiar bubble chat. What we are doing is, we did the risk assessment last year. Now we're going to launch the annual risk assessment this year. That's the timeline. We will start with a survey here this year. The goal is to use a lot of the data that we had already collected during the last year's risk assessment and build off of that. So we're not reinventing the wheel, and we're trying to minimize the impact on the business units as they participate in the risk assessment process. So the goal is to really identify if these are still the list of top enterprise risks. Are we doing are we rating these risks appropriately? Are they relative to each other? They're positioned right in this bubble chart? And is there anything new that's looming in the horizon that we need to look at? So the goal is to come back to the board in July and present it to you, our new list of top enterprise risks, in addition to what we are currently doing in terms of managing those risks. In terms of other significant enterprise risk activities, so first of all, we are actually partnering very closely with Bob's strategy team in terms of developing this offsite strategy workshop, developing scenarios that we will be playing with during these offsite workshops. We talked about enterprise risk assessment. We are going to include canals very soon, kind of similar approach, but canals being a new entity, being new to a formal risk assessment, we will have to spend a little time to sort of groom them and train them in terms of how to participate appropriately in this risk assessment activity. We have launched a business impact analysis with our effort to drive our business resiliency program. We are really one of the first steps is to really revamp the business continuity programs. So with that, we have the BIA, business impact analysis work that has already started. For insurance, we have launched a captive feasibility study, so that the idea is to house some of the risks that we are not able to really find outside market for transferring that risk. So we're trying to see if there is a way to hold that risk within a captive framework. So that's going on, and we have already talked to you about what we're doing in the commodity risk analytics. We have two software technology solutions that we are trying to implement. We have the RFPs out, and we are right now in the process of scheduling demos for the selected parties for those. Jill and I presented to you during the last meeting about our merchant portfolio hedging program. So we are one of our first, based on your guidance, we're trying to strengthen the governance of the program. Jill and I will come back to you in July, in May, to talk to you about what we have put in place in terms of governance of the hedging program. But just to give you some highlights, we are really redefining the roles of mid-office, front office, and back office with regard to hedging program. So risk management has taken over the publishing of the energy and capacity price curves, and no trader can make any changes to what already the hedging limits, approved volume, and price limits approved without the approval of our Executive Risk Management Committee. We are tracking counterparty credit exposures and credit ratings very, very actively. Today, 60% of our transactions are done through the exchange. So we're trying to, have a right balance between what transactions we do through the exchange, what transactions we do with specific counterparties. So as you can see, we're also tracking the gross margin, expected gross margin. So this is the first year we've implemented the gross margin target. So that's why you have 2017. We don't have a target because we didn't have the framework in place when we did the budget. For 2018, 19, and 20, you can see we have the gross margin targets in the budget, and then we're tracking where we stand every day. This is a daily tracking process. So you can see that we have these trends going forward, and then we have gross margin risk limits, as we talked about last time to you, so that we will, there are triggers in place to spur action if we get too close to those gross margin limits that we have already defined. And this is just to give you a flavor for the risks. So we have upside, we have the downside. These are 97.5% confidence interval limits. So this is again a reflection of what we were just talking about, the extent of magnitude of risk that we have with regard to gross margin in our merchant portfolio. So that's basically what I was going to talk about, are there any questions for me?
Anybody? Tony? No?
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabine.
Thank you.
Joe Kessler?
Good morning, Chairman, trustees, Gil, staff. On behalf of operations, I offer the following report. Actually, we're all in the green for operations, which is a good news for us. So, minor issues in generation, market readiness that were recovered very well. Transmission reliability is really a credit to Phil's staff, not only on the projection on these unexpected outages, but really planning his outage schedule very well. And no incidents to report on DART or environmental for February.
Because that's been a challenge area. Do you have a reason why it's so positive now? I mean,
traditionally.
It's not
We're
tracking.
happy.
No. Well, traditionally and early in the year, we start in a deficit because it's winter. So some of the work that we do is slips, trips, and falls. We did a very proactive approach to addressing that last year in training, and we're just guiding the folks. So it seems to have worked from that perspective. So we've had very few of those. We are going to have a DART to report next month. That's just occurred last week and this month to you on a cut. So it is happening. It is dangerous work, but we've done a lot to change the culture and make sure people are aware and really step back. And we're actually trying to inculcate that into the canal system as well to make sure that the folks know that they can stop work if they see something unsafe. So I think the culture's changed. I think some of the initiatives that John Kahopka and the folks have worked on are really starting to take hold. So hopefully that's the case.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Credit to the staff. Some of the things that we just accomplished this past month or since our last meeting is we had our own senior leadership offsite for utility operations. With all the changes that I talked to you about, we really wanted to get everybody in the room together and make sure we're kind of aligned with what's going on with some of the things that Gil's talked about in terms of digitization and some of the strategic initiatives. Of course, we want to keep going with and keep momentum on the items that we've already committed to you folks in terms of the LEMS and things like that, life extension modernization, and at the same time be flexible and agile enough to address the things that are going forward. So it was facilitated internally by Ricardo da Silva and Gary Prue, which are out of our operational excellence in our technology innovation group, and it was very well received. It was a good offsite. It was interrupted a bit by the storm. We had to dispatch a few folks out of the meeting for that, but it was a really good, meaningful meeting, and I think we're well aligned now to attend Gil's offsites and contribute there as well. And one of the successes that we're having, we're actually going to be presenting this at Gil's senior staff meeting with some level of demonstration, is even some of this digitization around our vegetation management. This is actually going to be something that we're going to have in the field with handhelds for our line crews who will now be out at the sites and be able to see what the customer concerns are in terms of communications with the customers, be able to enter work orders right away for anything that they observe with location identified, and there'll be real-time data entry into our Maximo system so that we can get work orders planned. So it's something we look forward to implementing throughout this year. So you'll be hearing more about that. Canal transfer, in terms of the operational transfer, everything's going as planned. Really no significant post-transfer issues. The day one welcomes were really kind of like these anniversary events over each site, attended by Kim Harriman, myself, other senior leaders, very well received. These people are really good people. It's in their fiber, the canals, so they're very interested in, what direction we're going into and very interested to hear what we have to say, and it's been very well received. The 100-day plans for post-transfer have been in progress. Everything's on schedule for that. And we are actually kind of intervened on Ken Lee's plans on Maximo solutions, but a lot of the temporary solutions are put in place for day one in IT. We've actually added a couple. He's been very successful in adapting to our requests to get some of those work management systems in place, and it's been very productive so far. And all the TSAs that we talked about, 5 have already been exited. The rest are on schedule. Most of them are related to ongoing non-recurring work that's going on that Thruway already started, and we're continuing to use their resources to finish up that work. Just makes sense to have the same folks involved there. But beyond that, everything's been very much on track with what we talked about so far. And with that, if there's any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Bob Murray, financial reports.
Round 2.
Nice brief report this month. I'm happy to report that, like Joe, we're all green too.
We like your company.
That's right. So For this report is showing the year-to-date net income for January and February. It's obviously very early in the year, so we don't tend to report projected results for the year end beyond what we already had in the budget. But so far, so good. So we had a budget through February for $15 million of net income. Our actual came in at $48 million of net income. So we're $32 million higher than budget. And there's basically three reasons for that. One is due to higher net margins. Another is due to lower operating expenses. And the third is a receipt of a one-time payment from Entergy related to residual rights and options that were extinguished when we transferred the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Fund to Entergy. The higher net margins included better than anticipated results at Niagara and St. Lawrence due to generation volumes that were 7% higher than budgeted. We got more water flows through our plants than we had budgeted. We also had some positive results from our hedging program that Subhagi talked about, offsetting energy price drops. We've done more and more hedging that have essentially negated that issue to a great degree. We also had lower payments for capacity on the HTP line due to the fact that that line is still out of commission. So we're not obligated to make the capacity payments for that line. We also had lower operating expenses during the period. That's largely reflecting timing differences between the way we budgeted and the way the expenses are actually going out. But it's too soon to say whether that's going to be ongoing or there'll likely be some reversal of that later in the year. So these results are certainly positive. Too soon to tell how it'll affect our year-end forecast, but good news so far.
I did have one question.
Yes.
On the breakdown, the energy prices and margin, what percentage would you say is captured by the margin growth as opposed to our hedging? Because even though we had higher, water levels, I would assume that, you hate to say this after we just had a snowstorm, but the demand, we didn't have a extremely cold winter, so I don't know if demand was different. That's what I thought. So
yes.
What's the percentage of this is from our hedging activity as opposed to sort of margin growth?
Well, most of that positive result. So the price drop and the hedging activity offset each other to a large degree. So that nets out at something approaching zero. So the number you see here is going to be a combination of that HTP capacity payment shortfall and the extra volume due to the water going through our plants. It is certainly true that due to lower demand, we're selling that extra volume at lower prices than we would have thought when we put the budget together. But again, that's just that price effect is to some degree offset by the hedging activity. Jill, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
So that's all correct, and I've also got some slides I'll show you about the fuel price changes up and down.
Okay.
Which affect some of our operating.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Brian Liu.
Mr. Chairman, just to introduce Brian. Brian is our Deputy Treasurer, and Brian has been working very closely with our customer team to put together financing options for our growing energy services business, particularly our energy efficiency program. So Brian has been working with third-party banks as well as with Jill's customer team to put together some new financing options that he'll talk to you about today.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning, Judge and trustees. My presentation today will cover how the authority intends to fund, can you go to the first page, to fund the projected growth in our energy efficiency business and seek your approval to pre-qualify a pool of banks and provide private capital as part of NYPA's new lending program. So since the 1980s, the authority has implemented and financed energy efficiency projects in the state of New York. With the development of the authority's strategic the authority's Customer Solutions Strategic Initiative and its updated business plan, the authority is now aggressively expanding its service offerings as well as its targeted customer segments. Beginning in 2017 and through 2020, as you can see on the graph, we're looking to increase our annual investments to a level of $300 million annually, or roughly double that of our 2016's actual spending. This increase presents new opportunities for the authority to think creatively outside the box on how to best manage NYPA's balance sheet capacity. Next slide. The authority has traditionally financed energy efficiency projects on balance sheet, using variable rate commercial paper as the primary funding instrument. On balance sheet means that NYPA uses its own funds to make a loan to the customer and takes the credit risk that the customer pays back the loan as promised. This on-balance sheet lending program with up to $600 million of dedicated capacity has worked well for us in the past, as 92% of our loan portfolio is highly rated, and the repayment period is generally between 5 to 10 years on average. As the pipeline of our future projects and customer segments expands, the authority anticipates that customer needs for longer financing terms, fixed rate alternatives, and financing requests from weaker credits such as local governments and school districts will likely to be on the rise. Cognizant of this shift, the authority recognized that a more robust lending program will be required to support the growth of NYPA's energy efficiency programs. Next slide, please. Based on projected future investments and in the absence of any alternative funding options, the authority will exceed the $600 million on balance sheet capacity by 2018. That $600 million limit has been set as a matter of policy to avoid crowding out our debt capacity that we will need for our core generation and transmission investments. As such, the authority has explored other financing alternatives that will allow the authority to preserve our strong credit rating and our capital capacity to fund for NYPA's core business needs. Next slide. After exploring various funding strategies, staff has determined that a private market solution will be optimal for meeting our new customer demands and preserving NYPA's balance sheet. We envision that by leveraging private market capital, the authority will be able to offer financing to customers who haven't qualified for the past and satisfy any potential access loan demand. At the same time, the authority will continue to fund AA- or higher credits using our balance sheet up to $600 million. When demand from lower and higher credit customers grows sufficiently in the future, NYPA can pool these credits together and, with the borrower's consent, issue bonds akin to the financing done by the New York State Green Bank. Refinancing with bonds will create a nearly unlimited source of private financing that will allow customer energy projects to grow without funding constraints. The new NYPA lending program will be delivered in the form of a tax-exempt municipal lease. A municipal lease is a very common financing structure for the government market. Communities in the state of New York, as well as other states, has found success utilizing this financing instrument. The legal documentation is standard and well understood, while overall transaction costs as compared to customers' other borrowing options tend to be lower. The currently developed NYPA municipal lease program will provide on-balance sheet financing during project construction. At project completion, the loan will be refinanced by a bank through a competitive selection process to be administered by NYPA. After receiving the refinancing proceeds from a bank, NYPA will be able to make more financing available to eligible customers. So in order to maximize our ability to utilize private market solutions, we have assembled a pool of banks that are experienced in providing energy efficiency financing through a tax-exempt municipal lease structure. Staff received interests from 16 banks to participate in NYPA's municipal lease program, of which 7 banks provided responses. The banks would pre-qualify using key evaluation criteria such as capital commitment, experience, pricing competitiveness, and acceptance of NYPA's documents. The pool of banks has a wide range of specialized lending attributes that could be a potential fit for different customer needs. Some banks have a focus in lower credits, longer lending terms, and higher deal size, while others specializes in short lending terms and higher credit names. Final bank assignment of an executed lease will be based on a competitive bidding process at the lease funding date. Pursuant to our competitive procurement process, we ask for your approval at this time to authorize the selection of 6 banks.
Okay,
Thank you.
a couple questions.
Sure.
I mean, I think it's great that we're looking at ways to try to create an avenue for financing what's clearly strategically important to us is, developing, energy efficiency, renewable energy, sort of the long-term strategy. What I'm trying to understand of what we're doing here is, well, first I'll start with, have we thought through and obviously talk with the credit agencies about the impact? This is a completely new business, so we're getting into the loan business, which has its own inherent risk, and the impact that would have on our financial standing, and we're comfortable with taking on that risk. As the initial lending entity, and then in addition to that, as we have part of our strategy is ultimately to refinance, and so you're taking on the risk of the ability to, and the hope that you're going to be able to refinance that in the future. So I just want to be comfortable with the impact this is going to have on our long-term.
Let me give you some background on that. So we have, as Brian indicated in the beginning, this is not a new program. We've been making loans from our balance sheet, from our own cash, and our commercial paper that we issue for a very long time, a couple of decades. We have about $500 million of loans outstanding today, and that's not an unusual amount. We've authorized $600 million as the total capacity of that program for the issuance of commercial paper to make those loans. And in every rating agency meeting that we have, we discuss with them the fact that we have this loan portfolio. They write it as part of the rating report, and they indicate that that what's important to them is, number one, we keep the total amount at a manageable level.
Which they
relative
consider to be.
Well, they've never given us a hard number, right? They don't do that. But we've said to them, this is the parameters we're using, and they feel comfortable with that. They take comfort in the size of the program relative to our total debt, because this is variable rate debt that we're issuing for the most part. And secondly, that we make our loans to very highly rated borrowers, so our confidence of getting repaid is very high. In fact, the people the entities we're lending to have roughly the same bond rating that we do, so they're comfortable with that. So what we're trying to do here is say the number of projects we're doing is expanding greatly, and it's also expanding in ways that could provide some additional credit risk outside of those parameters that we've told the rating agencies in the past. So if we go from AA rated borrowers to single A rated borrowers or BBB plus borrowers, they are just as needy of the funds and of the energy efficiency projects as the higher rated entities. We want to be able to do those projects, but we don't want to endanger our own credit rating, and we don't want to go in excess of the total program limit that we've set with the rating agencies for our total lending level, and importantly, the amount of commercial paper that we have to borrow to fund that program. So what we've done is said, for those somewhat weaker credits, which tend to be local governments. And for some of these new projects that we're going to do, let's find a way to do that outside of us taking the credit risk. Let somebody else take that credit risk. And we've found banks that will do that at a rate that is lower than those local governments could borrow on their own, because we're pulling this program together for them.
Like a guarantee too.
Well, we're not guaranteeing. That's the important part. So we are not guaranteeing any credit. This will be a contract between the bank and the borrower. We're not in it except as an agent. So we are bringing the program, the lending program together. We're accessing the market for them and getting them lower rates than they could get on their own. But then we're out of it as a guarantor. We're not in it as a guarantor. We're not a principal in the transaction. We're only an arranging agent or a broker, as it were. We're not a principal. So
to follow on that,
yes.
but that's only after the completion of the project. So essentially,
That's
there is
right.
that risk period.
And we're
during the project.
and we will. Yeah, there is,
Yeah.
and during that period of time, we're going to manage our total borrowing so that it stays within that $600 million cap. We expect there's going to be rapid turnover of those funds,
Yeah.
so we'll be able to lend them out very quickly.
Because a lot of the completion of that project is within the scope of NYPA's
That's
control.
exactly
so,
right. We feel
yeah.
we're very good understanding. The contractors we use are well known to us, and we have recourse against those contractors.
Any other questions? I'd like to call for a motion on the approval of this request while Tony's still here. Can I have a motion to approve the request?
Second.
Second. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. It's approved.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
I'd like to modify the agenda somewhat to go to Jill and HTP first. Tony is still here as well.
Okay. Good morning, trustees. So as Vice Chair Nicandri said, we're going to start with the HTP amendment. I'll come back up and do the commercial operations report later. So HTP, Hudson Transmission Partners, is an asset that NYPA is in a long-term agreement with, connecting New Jersey to Manhattan in order for us to import power from New Jersey. It's a 660 megawatt line, and NYPA contracts for currently 75% of that line. We started the lease in 2013. For the first 2.5 years, the line operated very well, but last year in 2016, it suffered several failures in the underwater portion of the line. I have a map up here that shows you approximately the route. You can see it starts in New Jersey, comes into the Hudson River, then turns south down the Hudson River for about 3.5 miles before going into Manhattan at Con Edison's West 49th Street. It's in this underwater portion of the line where all 3 of the failures in 2016 occurred. The first 2 failures were found by the owner-operator, who is Hudson Transmission Partners, repaired, and the line put back into service. When the third failure occurred on Thanksgiving Day, that time the operator decided to look at making a more significant upgrade to the line in order to prevent future failures from occurring, since all of these have been happening on the same cable. In addition to the lease agreement that NYPA is in and these operational challenges, there also have been several financial challenges associated with HTP that we've discussed with the board at length. We are responsible for the lease payment itself. NYPA does not have operating liability, which means all of these failures and repairs are all on the obligation of the owner, HTP. However, the contract that we executed with HTP does place on NYPA the obligation to pay for transmission upgrade charges that might be allocated to the line from the adjacent control area called PJM, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. It's the New York ISO that's directly next to us. So at the time of the contract execution, the estimates for those upgrade charges were modest and were baked into our financial estimates. However, there have been several regulatory changes and also contractual changes with other utilities that have resulted in a significant increase in that estimate. Today, we're looking at an estimate of over $650 million being allocated to HTP, and in turn from HTP to NYPA, because of these upgrade charges that don't have anything directly to do with the line itself. So what we have here is an opportunity. Because we have a technical issue with the line related to these operational challenges, HTP, the owner, is intending to replace the underwater portions of the line with a new technology. It uses, instead of a dielectric fluid, which is currently underwater, this uses a solid dielectric technology, and there'll be no fluid in the river portions of the line. But in order for them to do that, they require changes to our lease, because we are the majority off-taker, and there's several provisions that will require that they get our approval. So since we are now going in to open up this lease agreement and make changes, NYPA has used this opportunity to change the way these New Jersey costs are allocated to NYPA, our ability to handle the receiving of those costs. And so we have reached an amendment for a new deal between NYPA and HTP. We are going to increase the percentage of megawatts that we are leasing. Instead of 75%, we're going up to 575 megawatts, which is a little over 87%. But we are able to drastically improve our position associated with these upgrade costs. We're decreasing our exposure for what we have between now and the remaining term of the lease agreement. So today we're asking for trustee authorization for NYPA to finish our negotiations and execute the amended agreement, which I expect will happen here in the few weeks. We will then work immediately with HTP on those steps that we've achieved in this modified agreement in order to mitigate our cost exposure. And at the same time, the line owner and operator will begin their replacement of the line underwater once they've achieved all of their permits.
I had a background question. Are we able to recover the cost, that $650, well, maybe less? Are we able to recover that from our customers? That's something we could. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Any questions? Lest anyone think that we're just voting on this with just the background today. We've been briefed in executive session on this before, where we explained our questions and had our questions answered. So I call for a motion to approve the resolution as to the HTP transmission line agreement modification.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Approved.
Thank you. I'll be back up after this item.
Thanks for the team
I know, good
working
negotiation.
on that. That's a
Great job.
Kind of like stuck with it. Made the best out of it. Good job.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, trustees, Gil, and all in attendance today. As recommended by the Economic Development Power Allocation Board on March 20th, 2017, the trustees are requested to approve nearly 6.5 megawatts of Recharge New York power to the following: 3 large business retention allocations totaling over 1 megawatt, 3 large business expansion allocations totaling over 4.7 megawatts, and 8 small business-based allocations totaling approximately 0.7 megawatts. In total, these allocations would collectively support the retention and creation of over 1,300 jobs and $29 million of capital investment commitments. I do want to point out 2 specific customers who are making sizable contributions with respect to jobs. Best Yet Market, Inc. in Suffolk County is creating 125 new jobs for their allocation. And the Gunlock Company, which has been in existence since 1902, is creating 75 new jobs for their allocation.
What's the name of the company?
The second company is the Gunlock Company, LLC. That is in Wayland, New York, southern tier of Steuben County. And they've been at that location since 1902. The balance of available Recharge New York power to award is approximately 162 megawatts, of which 50% or 81 megawatts is hydropower. One way to replenish the program is through compliance, which will be brought to you at the May meeting. The 14 allocations will be distributed across 12 customers throughout the state. This item is submitted for your approval. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions of Keith? I have a motion to approve the Recharge New York power allocations.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Carry. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Jill, we go back to you. Commercial operations.
Thank you. So, unlike my colleagues Bob and Joe, I don't have all green arrows today. But my arrows, just because they're not green, that doesn't mean it's necessarily all bad. Customer usage, as Trustee McKibben pointed out earlier in this meeting, is down slightly. It just means that customers are using less energy, and that's one of our mission, to help our customers and the state as a whole be more energy efficient. Electric prices are down, which is also good for our customers. It's not so good for our merchant revenue that's not contracted. But on the flip side, electric prices are down largely because gas prices are down. Gas prices are down just, if you look budget, actual to budget, which means what we thought gas was going to be in November and December to what gas actually was in January and February, it's down 45% from that view. So the upside there is that makes our cost to operate our plants also lower. As Bob has mentioned, our generation is up. This is hydro-driven, so a little bit higher than what our actual forecast is, and we've been running higher than average, as Bob has explained. On the economic development side, one of the, I think, most exciting developments that we have going on right now is we're about to issue a request for proposals for new large-scale renewable energy. That's NYPA working towards helping the state meet its clean energy standard that was passed by the Public Service Commission last August. So we will be issuing a request for proposals to get pricing for renewable energy projects in New York and imported into New York, and that will be then provided to our customers to meet their renewable energy objectives as part of the clean energy standard. We expect to issue that in mid-April, and we're working closely with the New York State Electric Research Development Authority to coordinate who's also doing solicitations. On economic development, you just heard from Keith, so instead of saying you're about to approve, this, I think, already includes the 14 allocations that you've just approved, continuing to increase the amount of low-cost economic development power we have deployed to provide benefits to the state. And then lastly, Gil and Bob both talked about this business early on in today's presentation. We're putting a lot of focus, and we have continuing growth that we're seeing in our customer business. I reported to you at the last meeting that our actual investments for 2016 were $151 million. We're on target for 2017 to bring that up to $207 million. The revenues that NYPA generates associated with that will be approximately $23 million. That's both the fees that we generate for implementing the work and then also the launch and first commercial contracts from the New York Energy Manager, which Gil mentioned earlier. We also here, I like to highlight a different project each time I'm in front of you. I think I talked about the bridges last time, and we've talked about solar. This one is LED lighting. LED lighting is a huge growth opportunity for us. This is a project that we completed at SUNY Brockport, but right here in White Plains, we're working on LED lighting. We've got a project opportunity in Albany. We're working with our 5 city partners to do a lot of LED lighting. Gil was at the museum, State Museum, looking at the LED lighting that we did there. We think this is a great opportunity to have significant reduction in energy costs. It also helps reduce O&M costs and a very low payback periods.
Are the municipals participating in that LED lighting program?
So through our 5 cities program, at least 4 of them are working right now on LED projects.
Great. I did have a question. If we could go back to the large-scale renewables RFP that you sent around, and I think that's great. I was just trying to make sure I understood sort of the role that we're playing here. Because we're not offering PPAs. Are we offering PPAs? Or are we offering the financing for this renewable energy development? What's the NYPA role? Like,
So,
it wasn't quite clear to me.
Let me answer it from the financing side, and Jill can chime in about the development role that we're going to play. But from the financing side, we are making a number of optional offers to developers about ways we can assist them with financing the project at lower cost than they might be able to finance it through traditional financing. One way in which we're offering to do that is to enter into a back-to-back power purchase agreement, where we would enter into a power purchase agreement with the developer, and then we would enter into a mirrored agreement with our customer, so that we are not taking any of that tenor risk in between. There would be some theoretical risk that our customer wouldn't pay us back under that power purchase agreement. That's purely a credit risk that, as we've just described, we take all the time with our customers, and we're comfortable with that. But the pricing risk we don't take because we have the back-to-back contract. So what we're agreeing to do is that, depending on what the developer finds of interest, we might offer a straight power purchase agreement like that. We might offer to prepay that power purchase agreement, where it's it ostensibly is say a 20-year power purchase agreement, but we'll prepay say 65% of the obligation under that agreement, so that essentially the developer has cash in their pocket that they can use instead of going to, say, a tax equity provider or a bank to get that money. They've got the cash from the prepayment that can lower their overall cost of capital for the project. That's another option we're offering to them. And there may be other options that they're interested in from us, but we're trying to find creative ways to help finance these projects that don't involve substantial risk to us, but still involve us playing some active role as an intermediary between our customer and the developer.
And a lot of our customers are, for example, government customers. We can flow the tax-exempt benefit.
Yeah, so instead of, say, us owning the project, where we're not a tax-paying entity, we would if we owned it, we would forfeit all of the federal tax benefits by owning it. Whereas if a private owner continues to own the project, they can get the tax benefits or pass it through to a tax equity owner. So we're trying to do this in a way that's, it's not as simple as saying, well, we'll own it and build it. Because we want to preserve all of those tax benefits, we keep it in private ownership hands, and we act as a financier in the process, not an owner.
But does that limit you then to just private companies as opposed to state agencies?
The customer can still be a public entity, yeah. But the owner of the project for tax purposes has to be a private entity.
Got it. Okay, great. Good, thanks.
Good. Thank you.
And the LED lighting, just to emphasize this, we believe it's going to be a really fast-growing business. LED technology has matured. They use a lot less energy than standard lighting, and I think the bigger benefit really is the operation and maintenance, because they last a lot longer, right? And so we're going to work with cities and counties and towns and villages. We believe that street lighting, traffic lighting, parking lighting, especially are good targets for us. Now, coupled with the tax-exempt municipal lease financing product that we have, we can really provide a turnkey service. We can do it from soup to nuts, including financing.
Now, are we doing the actual work, or do we contract out and bring in independent companies who specialize in LED lighting?
So we have implementation contractors who do the work, but it's my team that does the oversight and project management. We also have in-house engineering, so sometimes we engineer it ourselves, but we can also use outside engineering.
Yeah. So we're the developer, program project manager with technical expertise, but the actual turning of the wrench we sub out.
No votes required on that. So, with help of the corporate secretary's office, I'm going to make a corporate decision and omit the committee reports, because all the trustees were at the committees that were in public, so we'd be hearing ourselves talk. So we're going to omit those today. Next item is closing. And we need a motion to do that. After the next meeting will be held on May 2nd, 2017, at the St. Lawrence Power Project, St. Lawrence County, New York. I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.